Sarah Mitchell stood at the edge of the dusty settlement, her wedding dress torn and stained with dirt. The white fabric that should have made her look beautiful on her wedding day now made her feel like a ghost. Behind her, she could hear the angry voices of the townspeople getting quieter as she walked further away from everything she had ever known. Just 3 hours ago, she had been standing at the altar of the small wooden church in Copper Creek. Her heart had been beating fast with excitement and nervousness. James Patterson, the banker's son, was supposed to be her husband. Everyone in town said she was lucky to marry into such a respectable family. Her own father, a struggling shopkeeper, had been so proud when James asked for her hand. But then everything went wrong. Right before they could say their vows, a woman burst through the church doors. She was crying and carrying a small baby in her arms. The woman pointed at James and screamed that he was the father of her child. She said he had promised to marry her first before he even met Sarah. The church went completely silent. Sarah looked at James, waiting for him to deny it, to say the woman was lying. Instead, his face turned red and he looked down at his feet. That was all the answer anyone needed. The truth was written all over his guilty expression. James's father was furious, but not at his son. He was angry at Sarah, as if somehow this was all her fault. He started yelling that Sarah must have known about this other woman. He said she was trying to trap his son into marriage. Other people in the church began to whisper and point at her. Some even nodded their heads, agreeing with the banker. Sarah tried to speak up for herself, but nobody would listen. Her own father just stood there, too shocked and embarrassed to defend her. In less than an hour, the whole town had turned against her. They called her names and said she was a liar and a troublemaker. They said she had brought shame to their peaceful community. The sheriff, who was James's uncle, told her she had to leave town immediately. He said if she stayed, there would be trouble, and it would be her fault if anyone got hurt. Sarah tried to explain that she had done nothing wrong, but he wouldn't hear it. He gave her 1 hour to pack her things and get out of Copper Creek forever now. She was walking down the dirt road with nothing but a small bag of clothes and the few dollars she had, saved from working in her father's shop. She had no idea where to go or what to do. The nearest town was 50 miles away through dangerous desert country. She had heard stories about wild animals, bandits, and hostile Apache warriors who attacked travelers. The sun was getting lower in the sky, and Sarah knew she needed to find shelter before dark. She had never spent a night outside in her whole life. Everything she knew about surviving in the wilderness came from stories other people told, and most of those stories ended badly. As she walked, she tried not to cry. Crying wouldn't help her now. She needed to be strong and figure out how to survive, but it was hard not to feel sorry for herself. This morning she had woken up thinking she was about to start a new life as a married woman. Now she was homeless and completely alone. The road stretched out in front of her like a brown ribbon across the empty landscape. On both sides there was nothing but rocks, scrub brush, and scattered cactus plants. The mountains in the distance looked beautiful, but Sarah knew they were full of dangers she couldn't even imagine. She thought about her mother, who had died when Sarah was 12. Her mother always told her to be brave and kind no matter what happened. God has a plan for everyone, her mother used to say. Sometimes we can't see it right away, but good things come to those who don't give up hope. Sarah tried to hold on to those words as she walked. Maybe her mother was right. Maybe this terrible day was leading her toward something better. She couldn't see how that was possible right now, but she didn't have much choice except to keep believing it. The wedding dress made it hard to walk. It was long and heavy, and it kept getting caught on thorns and rocks. Sarah thought about taking it off, but she didn't have any other clothes with her except what was in her small bag. She would have to make do with what she had. As the sun continued to drop toward the horizon, Sarah began to worry more about where she would spend the night. She had passed a few old buildings along the road, but they were all falling down and didn't look safe. She was starting to think she might have to sleep out in the open when she saw something that made her heart race with fear. In the distance, she could see dust clouds rising from the road behind her. Someone was coming and they were moving fast. Sarah's first thought was that it might be people from town coming after her, maybe to cause her more trouble. Her second thought was that it might be bandits or other dangerous men who would see a woman alone and think she was easy prey. She looked around desperately for a place to hide, but there was nowhere to go. The land was too flat and open. Whoever was coming would see her easily. All she could do was keep walking and hope for the best. The dust clouds got bigger and closer, Soon she could hear the sound of horses galloping. Sarah's hand started shaking and her mouth felt dry with fear. She clutched her small bag tighter and tried to walk faster, but the wedding dress made it almost impossible to move quickly. Then she heard something that made her blood freeze. It was a sound she had heard described many times but had never heard herself. It was the war cry of Apache warriors, echoing across the empty desert like the call of wild animals hunting their prey. Sarah's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. The Apache war cries grew louder as the riders got closer. She had heard terrible stories about what happened to white settlers who were captured by Apache warriors. Some people said they were tortured for days before being killed. Others said they were taken as slaves and never seen again. She stopped walking and turned to face whatever was coming. If these were her last moments alive, she didn't want to die running like a coward. Her mother had always taught her to face troubles with dignity, even when she was afraid. Through the dust, she could see 5 riders on horseback coming toward her at full speed. They were Apache warriors, just as she had feared. Even from a distance, she could see their long black hair flying behind them, and the weapons they carried. Their horses were small but looked fast and strong. Sarah closed her eyes and said a quick prayer. She asked God to make her death quick and to help her be brave. She thought about her mother waiting for her in heaven, and tried to find comfort in that idea. At least she wouldn't be alone much longer. But when she opened her eyes, something strange happened. The Apache riders had slowed down and were approaching her more carefully. They weren't screaming war cries anymore. Instead, they seemed curious about her, like they had never seen anything quite like her before. The leader of the group was a young man who looked to be about her own age. He had strong features and dark eyes that seemed to see everything at once. His horse was black with white markings, and it danced nervously under him as he pulled it to a stop about 20 feet away from her. The 5 warriors sat on their horses in a line, looking at Sarah with expressions she couldn't read. She expected them to attack her immediately, but instead they just watched her. The silence stretched out for what felt like forever. Sarah could hear her own breathing and the sound of the horses snorting and stamping their feet. Finally, the young leader said something to the others in their own language. His voice was deep and calm, not angry like she had expected. The other warriors responded, but Sarah couldn't understand any of the words they spoke. Then the leader looked directly at her and spoke in English. His accent was thick, but she could understand him clearly. "Why do you walk alone in the desert, white woman? Are you lost?" Sarah was so surprised to hear him speak her language that it took her a moment to answer. She had expected them to attack first and ask questions later, if at all. I'm traveling to the next town," she managed to say, though her voice shook with fear. The warrior looked at her torn wedding dress and the small bag she carried. "You travel with no horse, no water, no food. You will die before you reach any town." He said this matter-of-factly, like he was telling her the weather. "Maybe that would be better," Sarah said quietly, more to herself than to him. The warrior's expression changed slightly. He tilted his head like he was trying to understand something. "You wish to die?" Sarah realized how her words must have sounded. "No, it's just that I have nowhere to go. My own people threw me out. They said I was a troublemaker and a liar. They said I brought shame to their town." The words came out in a rush, and she felt foolish for telling her problems to people who probably wanted to kill her anyway. The leader and the other warriors spoke among themselves again. Their conversation went on for several minutes, and Sarah noticed that it didn't sound angry or violent. It sounded like they were having a serious discussion about something important. While they talked, Sarah studied the leader more carefully. He wore traditional Apache clothing, but she could see that some of his equipment was military issue, probably taken from soldiers. His face was painted with red and yellow designs that she didn't understand, but somehow they didn't make him look frightening. They made him look dignified, like a person of importance. When the discussion ended, the leader looked at her again. "My name is Running Wolf. These are my brothers." He gestured to the other warriors. "We were hunting when we saw you. The desert is no place for a woman alone, especially a white woman in a wedding dress." Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She knew she must look ridiculous in her stained and torn dress, carrying her small bag like a lost child. "I'm Sarah Mitchell," she said. "I was supposed to get married today, but things went wrong." Running Wolf nodded slowly. "I see this. Someone hurt you badly to make you choose the desert over staying with your people." His understanding surprised her. She had expected cruelty or indifference, but there was something almost gentle in his voice. They said it was my fault that my fiancé had been with another woman. They said I knew about it and tried to trick him into marriage anyway. None of it was true, but they wouldn't listen to me. White people often blame the wrong person when there is trouble, Running Wolf said. It is easier than admitting one of their own did something bad. The truth of his words hit Sarah hard. That was exactly what had happened. Instead of being angry at James for lying and cheating, everyone had found it easier to blame her. She was an outsider in her own community, the daughter of a poor shopkeeper rather than someone with real influence. Running Wolf spoke to his companions again, and this time their discussion was shorter. When it ended, he looked back at Sarah with what might have been sympathy in his dark eyes. You cannot survive alone in the desert, he said, but my people and your people are enemies. If we take you with us, both sides will say we kidnapped you. If we leave you here, you will die before morning. This is a problem with no good answer. Sarah felt a strange calm settle over her. At least someone was being honest with her about her situation. What would you do if I were Apache instead of white? Running Wolf considered her question seriously. If you were Apache and had been cast out unjustly, we would take you in. We would give you a chance to prove your worth. But you are not Apache. No, Sarah agreed. I'm just a woman with nowhere to go and no one who believes in her. The sun was getting very low now and the desert was starting to cool down. Sarah could see the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. Whatever these warriors decided to do with her, it would be decided soon. Running Wolf made a decision. He dismounted from his horse and walked toward her slowly, keeping his hands visible so she wouldn't be afraid. When he was close enough to speak quietly, he said, I will make you an offer, Sarah Mitchell. You can come with us tonight. We will give you food and water and a safe place to sleep. Tomorrow we will take you to a trading post where you can find your own people again. But if you come with us, you must trust us completely. Can you do this? Sarah looked into his eyes and saw something she hadn't seen all day in any white person's face. She saw respect. This man, who had every reason to see her as an enemy, was offering her kindness when her own people had shown her none. Sarah looked at Running Wolf's extended hand for a long moment. Everything she had ever been taught told her that going with Apache warriors was certain death. But everything she had been taught had also told her that her own people would protect her and treat her fairly, and that had turned out to be completely wrong. Yes, she said finally, and took his hand. I trust you. Running Wolf helped her mount behind one of the other warriors, an older man with gray streaks in his hair who smiled at her kindly. The warrior's name was Stone Bear, and he made sure she was secure before they began riding toward the mountains. As they traveled, Sarah was amazed by how differently the Apache moved through the desert compared to white travelers she had seen. They seemed to know every rock and bush, every hidden water source and safe path. Their horses were sure-footed and moved silently across ground that would have been difficult for her to walk on. The Apache camp was hidden in a canyon between two tall rock walls. Sarah would never have found it on her own, even if she had been looking for it. As they rode in, she saw that it was much larger than she had expected. There were at least 50 people living there, including women, children, and elderly people. Everyone stopped what they were doing to stare at her as they passed. Sarah felt self-conscious in her wedding dress, which looked even more ridiculous now that it was covered with dust from the ride. Some of the people looked curious, others looked suspicious, and a few looked openly hostile. Running Wolf helped her down from the horse and led her to a small fire where an elderly woman was cooking. The woman looked at Sarah for a long time without speaking, then said something sharp to Running Wolf in Apache. He answered her calmly, and they had what sounded like an argument. Finally, the elderly woman turned to Sarah and spoke in broken English. I am Singing Bird, grandmother to Running Wolf. He says you are cast out by your people for something you did not do. Is this true? Sarah nodded. Yes, ma'am. They blamed me for my fiancé's dishonesty. They said I brought shame to their town, but I did nothing wrong. Singing Bird studied her face carefully as if she could see the truth written there. After a moment, she nodded. I believe you. Your eyes are sad but not guilty. Come, you must be hungry and thirsty. The old woman gave Sarah a bowl of stew made with meat and vegetables she didn't recognize, but it tasted better than anything she had eaten in days. She also gave her water that was cool and clean, much better than the warm, metallic-tasting water from the well in Copper Creek. While Sarah ate, other Apache people came to look at her. Most were just curious, but one young warrior named Blackhawk, made it clear he didn't approve of her presence. He spoke angrily to Running Wolf, gesturing at Sarah several times. Running Wolf remained calm during the argument, but Sarah could see tension in his shoulders. When Blackhawk finally walked away, still clearly unhappy, Running Wolf came to sit beside her. Blackhawk thinks it is dangerous to help a white woman, he explained. He says your people will think we kidnapped you and use it as an excuse to attack us. Will they? Sarah asked. She was starting to realize that her presence might cause trouble for people who had shown her only kindness. Running Wolf shrugged. Maybe. White people often look for reasons to make war on us. But that is their choice, not ours. We cannot control what they do, only what we do. As the evening went on, Sarah began to feel more comfortable around the Apache people. The children were especially curious about her, and several came to touch her blonde hair, which they seemed to find fascinating. The women were more reserved, but they weren't unfriendly. Singing Bird brought her a blanket and showed her a place where she could sleep near the fire. In the morning we will find you better clothes, the old woman said. That dress is not good for traveling in the desert. Sarah looked down at her ruined wedding dress. It represented everything that had gone wrong in her life. But it was also the only thing she had left from her old world. What should I do with it? That is your choice, Singing Bird said. But sometimes it is good to let go of things that bring us pain. That night, Sarah lay under the Apache blanket looking up at more stars than she had ever seen in her life. The town of Copper Creek had too many lights and buildings to see the sky clearly. But here in the desert, the stars seemed close enough to touch. She thought about how strange her life had become in just one day. This morning she had been a shopkeeper's daughter, preparing to marry a banker's son. Tonight she was sleeping in an Apache camp, surrounded by people who were supposed to be her enemies, but who had treated her better than her own townspeople. She could hear the Apache people talking quietly around their fires, and the sound was comforting rather than frightening. Children laughed, adults discussed the events of the day, and elders told stories in their musical language. It reminded her of the evenings she had spent with her mother before she died, when they would sit together and talk about their hopes and dreams. As she was finally drifting off to sleep, she heard footsteps approaching. She opened her eyes and saw Running Wolf standing nearby, silhouetted against the stars. Are you afraid? He asked quietly. Sarah thought about the question. I should be, she said. But I'm not. I feel safer here than I did in my own town today. Running Wolf sat down beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. That is sad, but not surprising. Sometimes strangers treat us better than the people who are supposed to love us. Why did you help me? Sarah asked. You could have just left me in the desert. Running Wolf was quiet for a long moment. My sister was cast out by her husband's family when she could not have children, he said finally. They said she was cursed and brought bad luck. She died alone because no one would help her. When I saw you today, I saw her. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. I'm sorry about your sister. Her name was Gentle Rain, Running Wolf said. She was kind to everyone, even those who were cruel to her. I could not save her, but maybe I could save you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, looking up at the stars. Sarah realized she had learned more about kindness and justice from this Apache warrior in one evening than she had from a lifetime of Sunday sermons in Copper Creek. What will happen to me tomorrow? She asked. There is a trading post 2 days' ride from here, Running Wolf said. The man who runs it is fair to both Apache and white people. He can help you find a way to the nearest town, or maybe give you work if you prefer not to go back to your own people right away. Sarah nodded, but she felt a strange reluctance to leave. For the first time in her life, she was in a place where people judged her by her actions, rather than her family's status or the gossip of neighbors. Running Wolf? She said, yes. Thank you. For everything. He stood up and looked down at her with something that might have been sadness in his eyes. Sleep well, Sarah Mitchell. Tomorrow will bring new challenges. As he walked away, Sarah realized that she didn't want tomorrow to come. She wanted to stay in this moment under the stars, in a place where she felt valued and safe. But she knew that was impossible. She was white and he was Apache, and their worlds were not meant to touch for more than a brief moment of unexpected kindness. Sarah woke up before dawn to the sound of horses approaching the canyon. The Apache camp came alive immediately, with warriors grabbing their weapons and women gathering the children. Sarah sat up, confused and frightened by the sudden activity. Running Wolf appeared at her side quickly, his face serious. "White soldiers are coming," he said quietly. "Many of them. You must decide quickly what you want to do." Through the entrance to the canyon, Sarah could see dust clouds rising in the early morning light. The sound of horses and men's voices echoed off the rock walls, getting louder by the minute. "What are my choices?" Sarah asked, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "You can go to them and tell them we treated you well," Running Wolf said. "They will take you back to white settlements. Or you can hide with us and hope they do not find you." Before Sarah could answer, the soldiers arrived. There were at least 20 of them, led by a cavalry officer with a thick mustache and cold blue eyes. Sarah recognized him immediately. It was Captain Morrison, who sometimes came to Copper Creek for supplies. He was known for his hatred of Apache people and his belief that the only good Indian was a dead Indian. Captain Morrison rode into the camp with his soldiers spread out behind him, their rifles ready. "I'm looking for a white woman," he announced loudly. "We have reports that Apache raiders kidnapped her from the road yesterday." Running Wolf stepped forward calmly, his hands visible but near his weapons. "No one here has kidnapped anyone, soldier." The captain's eyes narrowed as he looked around the camp. "Don't lie to me, Savage. We tracked you here. We know you took her." That was when Sarah made her decision. She stood up and walked toward the soldiers, still wearing her torn wedding dress. "Captain Morrison," she called out. "I'm here." The captain turned toward her with relief on his face, but when he saw that she wasn't tied up or injured, his expression became confused. "Miss Mitchell, are you all right? Did these savages hurt you?" "No," Sarah said clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "They saved my life. I was dying in the desert and they gave me food, water, and shelter. They treated me with more kindness than I received from my own people." Captain Morrison's face turned red with anger. "Don't be ridiculous. These are Apache warriors. They don't help white people. They must have threatened you or done something to make you defend them." "That's not true," Sarah said firmly. "They found me after I was cast out of Copper Creek. They could have left me to die, but instead they helped me. No one forced me to come with them, and no one has harmed me in any way." The captain looked around the camp with suspicious eyes. "Then why are you still here? Why didn't you leave immediately?" Sarah realized she didn't have a good answer for that question. She had stayed because she felt more welcome here than anywhere else, but she couldn't say that without making things worse for the Apache people. Running Wolf stepped closer to her. "We were going to take her to the trading post today," he said. "She needed rest and proper supplies before traveling further." "I'll take her from here," Captain Morrison said. "And I'm warning you people to stay away from white settlements. Next time we might not be so understanding." Several of the Apache warriors moved closer when they heard the threatening tone in his voice. Sarah could feel the tension building and knew that violence might break out at any moment. She had to do something to prevent bloodshed. "Captain Morrison," she said quickly, "these people have done nothing wrong. In fact, they went out of their way to help me when no one else would. I would be dead right now if not for their kindness." The captain looked at her like she had lost her mind. "Miss Mitchell, I think your ordeal has affected your judgment. These people are savages. They're not capable of kindness, only animal cunning. They probably plan to hold you for ransom or worse." His words made Sarah angry. "You're wrong about them. They're good people who helped a stranger in need. That's more than I can say for the so-called civilized folks in Copper Creek." Captain Morrison's eyes went cold. "I think you need medical attention, miss. You're obviously not thinking clearly. Johnson, help Miss Mitchell onto a horse. We're leaving immediately." A young soldier dismounted and approached Sarah, but she stepped back toward Running Wolf. "I don't want to go with you," she said. The words surprised everyone, including Sarah herself. She hadn't planned to say them, but as soon as they were out of her mouth, she knew they were true. She didn't want to go back to a world where people like Captain Morrison made decisions about who was good and who was evil based on the color of their skin. "Miss Mitchell," the captain said, his voice becoming dangerous, "you don't have a choice in the matter. You're a white woman, and it's my duty to return you to your own people. These savages have obviously filled your head with lies and confusion." Running Wolf moved slightly, positioning himself between Sarah and the soldiers. "The woman says she does not want to go. Among my people, we respect a woman's right to make her own choices." "Well, you're not among your people anymore," Captain Morrison snarled. "You're in territory controlled by the United States Army, and I'm ordering you to step aside." The other Apache warriors had formed a loose circle around Sarah and Running Wolf. They weren't pointing weapons at the soldiers yet, but everyone could see that they were ready to fight if necessary. Sarah realized that her presence was about to cause a battle that could result in people dying on both sides. She couldn't let that happen, especially when these Apache people had shown her nothing but kindness. "Wait," she said loudly. "Please, everyone, just wait." She walked to the center of the space between the two groups where everyone could see her clearly. "Captain Morrison, I appreciate that you came looking for me. I know you thought you were doing your duty, but these people didn't kidnap me. They rescued me. There's a difference." "Miss Mitchell," the captain said impatiently, "you're confused and probably suffering from shock. Just come with us now and we'll get you proper medical care." "I'm not confused," Sarah said firmly. "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. Yesterday, my own people threw me out of town for something I didn't do. They called me names, threatened me, and forced me to walk into the desert alone. These Apache people found me and treated me with respect and dignity. They fed me, gave me shelter, and protected me from harm." She looked around at both groups of armed men. "Now you're telling me that the people who helped me are savages, and the people who abandoned me are civilized. I'm sorry, Captain, but I think you have it backwards." Captain Morrison's face was getting redder by the minute.
"Miss Mitchell, I'm losing patience with this nonsense."
"You're coming with us right now, whether you want to or not." That was when Running Wolf spoke up again, and his voice carried a note of steel that made everyone pay attention. "The woman has made her choice, soldier. If you try to take her by force, you will have to go through us first." The soldiers raised their rifles and the Apache warriors reached for their weapons. Sarah found herself standing in the middle of what was about to become a battlefield, and she knew that whatever happened next would be her fault. "Cast out as a bride, Part 5, stop," Sarah shouted, throwing her arms wide to position herself between the soldiers and the Apache warriors. "Nobody needs to die over this. I'll go with you, Captain Morrison, but only if you give me your word that these people will be left in peace." Captain Morrison looked suspicious. "Why would you protect them if they didn't do something to you? It's not natural for a white woman to side with savages against her own kind." "They're not savages," Sarah said, her voice strong despite her fear. "They're human beings who showed me kindness when my own kind showed me none. And they're not my enemies just because you say they are." Running Wolf stepped closer to her. "You do not have to sacrifice yourself for us, Sarah Mitchell. We can take care of ourselves." Sarah looked at him and saw something in his eyes that made her heart beat faster. It wasn't just gratitude or friendship. There was something deeper there. Something that made her want to stay in this canyon forever rather than return to the world that had rejected her. "I know you can," she said softly, "but I don't want anyone to get hurt because of me." She turned back to Captain Morrison. "I'll come with you, but I want to say goodbye first." The captain looked impatient, but he nodded. "Make it quick. We have a long ride ahead of us." Sarah walked to Singing Bird first. The elderly woman took her hands and spoke in Apache, then switched to English. "You are always welcome in our camp, daughter. Remember that." The word daughter made Sarah's eyes fill with tears. No one had called her that since her mother died. "Thank you for everything," she whispered. She said goodbye to the other Apache people who had shown her kindness, especially the children who had been so fascinated by her blonde hair. Each farewell felt like she was leaving pieces of her heart behind. Finally, she came to Running Wolf. He was standing slightly apart from the others, his face carefully expressionless. But his eyes told a different story. "I wish things were different," Sarah said quietly so only he could hear. "So do I," Running Wolf replied. "But wishing does not change the world." For a moment, they just looked at each other. Sarah wanted to tell him that in one night, he had shown her more respect and understanding than she had received in 22 years of life in Copper Creek. She wanted to tell him that she had never felt as safe and valued as she had sitting by his fire under the desert stars. Instead, she said, "Will I see you again?" Running Wolf glanced toward the impatient soldiers. "Our paths are not meant to cross, Sarah Mitchell. You belong in the white world and I belong here. What if I don't want to belong in the white world anymore?" The question surprised them both. Sarah hadn't planned to say it, but once the words were out, she realized how true they were. The thought of going back to live among people who had treated her so cruelly made her feel sick. Running Wolf's expression softened. "You are angry and hurt right now, but you are white and you have white people's opportunities. You can make a new life somewhere else. Find good people among your own kind. You should not throw that away because of one bad day. It wasn't just one bad day, Sarah said. It was a lifetime of being told I wasn't good enough because my family wasn't rich, because I worked in a shop instead of sitting in a parlor all day. Yesterday was just when it all came to a head. Before Running Wolf could respond, Captain Morrison's voice cut through the air. That's enough talking, Miss Mitchell. We're leaving now. The young soldier, Johnson, approached her again. This time Sarah didn't resist when he helped her onto a spare horse. But as the soldiers prepared to ride out, she found herself looking back at Running Wolf with desperate eyes. What if I came back? She called to him. What if I chose to come back? Running Wolf looked at her for a long moment, then at the soldiers surrounding her. Do not make choices based on anger, Sarah Mitchell. Make them based on what you truly want from life. As the soldiers rode out of the canyon, Sarah kept looking back until Running Wolf and the Apache camp disappeared behind the rock walls. She felt like she was leaving the only place where she had ever truly belonged. The ride to the nearest settlement took 2 days. During that time, Captain Morrison and his men treated her politely but with obvious confusion. They couldn't understand why she didn't seem grateful to be rescued from the Apache. Those savages must have done something to your mind, Captain Morrison said on the first evening as they made camp. No decent white woman would defend them otherwise. They treated me with more decency than anyone in Copper Creek did, Sarah replied. That's different, the captain said dismissively. Copper Creek people are civilized. They have standards and morals. Sometimes that means making hard decisions about people who don't meet those standards. Sarah stared at him in amazement. So it was moral for them to throw me out into the desert to die? If you brought shame on the community, then yes, Captain Morrison said matter-of-factly. A community has to protect its reputation. But I didn't bring shame on anyone, Sarah protested. James Patterson was the one who lied and cheated. I was just as much a victim as that other woman and her baby. Captain Morrison shrugged. Maybe so, but you're the one who got caught up in it. Sometimes innocent people suffer for the greater good. Sarah felt anger burning in her chest. The greater good? Whose greater good? James Patterson's family gets to keep their reputation while I lose everything? That's how the world works, miss. The strong protect themselves and the weak get swept aside. It's not fair, but it's natural. Sarah thought about Running Wolf and how different his ideas about justice were. Among the Apache, she'd seen people take care of each other regardless of their status or wealth. No one was considered disposable. On the second day, they reached Fort Apache, a military outpost that served as a supply center for several scattered settlements. Captain Morrison took Sarah to the post commander, Major Hamilton, and explained how he had rescued her from the Apache. Major Hamilton was a tired-looking man with gray hair and sad eyes. He listened to the captain's story, then looked at Sarah carefully. Are you injured, miss? Do you need medical attention? No, sir, Sarah said. The Apache people took good care of me. The major's eyebrows went up slightly. The Apache took care of you? Yes, sir. They gave me food, water, shelter, and protection. They treated me with kindness and respect. Major Hamilton exchanged glances with Captain Morrison. Miss, I've been dealing with Apache for 15 years. They're not known for kindness to white captives. I wasn't a captive, Sarah said firmly. I was a guest. There's a difference. The major leaned back in his chair and studied her face. Tell me exactly what happened from the beginning. Sarah told him the whole story, starting with the ruined wedding and ending with her rescue by the soldiers. She left nothing out, including her own reluctance to leave the Apache camp. When she finished, Major Hamilton was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, Miss Mitchell, that's a very unusual story. Most encounters between white settlers and Apache don't end with the settlers defending the Apache. Most white settlers probably aren't treated as well as I was, Sarah replied. Captain Morrison, the major said, did you verify Miss Mitchell's story about what happened in Copper Creek? Captain Morrison looked uncomfortable. Well, no, sir. I just assumed. You assumed. Major Hamilton's voice was dry. Miss Mitchell, is there anyone in Copper Creek who would vouch for your version of events? Sarah thought about it sadly. I don't think so, sir. Everyone seemed to believe what they wanted to believe, regardless of the truth. The major nodded slowly. I see. And now you find yourself with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. Yes, sir. Major Hamilton stood up and walked to the window looking out at the desert. Miss Mitchell, I'm going to give you some choices. I can arrange for you to travel to San Antonio, where you might find work as a seamstress or shopkeeper. Or you can stay here at the fort and work in the laundry or kitchen until you save enough money to go somewhere else. Sarah waited for him to mention a third option, but he didn't. Those are my only choices? The major turned back to her. What other choice would you want? Sarah took a deep breath. What if I wanted to go back to the Apache? Both men stared at her like she had lost her mind. Captain Morrison sputtered, "That's insane! You can't be serious." But Major Hamilton held up a hand to quiet the captain. "Miss Mitchell, why would you want to do that?" "Because for the first time in my life I felt like I belonged somewhere," Sarah said simply. "I felt valued and respected. I felt safe." "You felt safe with Apache warriors?" Captain Morrison asked incredulously. "Safer than I feel with my own people," Sarah replied. Major Hamilton sat back down and looked at her seriously. "Miss Mitchell, I need you to understand something. If you go back to the Apache, you'll be considered a renegade by white society. You'll never be welcome in any settlement again. Your life will be hard, dangerous, and uncertain." "As opposed to the safe, comfortable life I have now?" Sarah asked with bitter humor. The major almost smiled. "I see your point. But there's something else you need to consider. The Apache you stayed with, they're not hostile to whites right now, but that could change. There's a lot of pressure from Washington to move all Apache onto reservations. If fighting breaks out, you could be caught in the middle." Sarah felt her heart leap with hope, but she forced herself to think carefully about what he was asking. "You want me to spy on them?" "I want you to help me keep the peace," Major Hamilton said. "If I know what the Apache are thinking and planning, I can prevent misunderstandings that might lead to bloodshed." It wasn't perfect, but it was a chance to return to the people who had shown her kindness. "I'll do it," Sarah said, "but I won't betray them if they trust me." "I wouldn't ask you to," the major said. "I just want to avoid unnecessary conflicts." Captain Morrison looked like he wanted to object, but Major Hamilton's steady gaze silenced him. "There's one more thing," the major said. "If you do this, there's no going back. Once you leave this fort, you'll be on your own. The army won't be able to protect you if things go wrong." Sarah thought about her choices. She could go to San Antonio and try to build a new life among strangers who might treat her the same way Copper Creek had. She could stay at the fort and live as a servant, or she could return to people who had already shown her more kindness in one night than she had received in years. "I understand," she said. "When can I leave?" Cast out as a bride. Part 6. 3 days later, Sarah rode back toward the Apache Canyon on a sturdy brown mare, wearing practical clothes instead of her wedding dress. She had burned the dress in a ceremony behind the fort, watching the white fabric turn to ash and smoke. It felt like burning away her old life to make room for whatever came next. Major Hamilton had given her supplies, a rifle she barely knew how to use, and a leather pouch containing silver coins. More importantly, he had given her a chance to choose her own path instead of having one forced on her. The desert looked different now that she was traveling by choice instead of fleeing in desperation. The rocks and cacti were still harsh and unforgiving, but they also had a stark beauty that she was beginning to appreciate. The endless sky made her feel small but also free, like she could ride in any direction and become anyone she wanted to be. When she reached the canyon, she found Apache sentries waiting for her. They had seen her coming from miles away, and word had already reached the camp that the white woman was returning. The sentries escorted her down into the canyon, where she found the entire community gathered to see what would happen. Running Wolf stood in the center of the group, his face showing surprise but not displeasure. Singing Bird was beside him, and Sarah was relieved to see something that looked like approval in the old woman's eyes. Sarah dismounted and walked toward Running Wolf, leading her horse. When she was close enough to speak without shouting, she stopped and waited for him to speak first. She had learned enough about Apache customs to know that barging into their camp and making demands would be disrespectful. "Sarah Mitchell returns," Running Wolf said, and she could hear curiosity in his voice. "This is unexpected." "I told you I might come back," Sarah said. "I meant it. The soldiers let you go?" "Major Hamilton at Fort Apache gave me a choice," Sarah explained. "I could go to San Antonio and try to start over, or I could come back here." Running Wolf's eyes narrowed slightly. What did you have to promise him in return? Sarah had expected this question and had thought carefully about how to answer it. She decided that honesty was the only way to build trust. He asked me to let him know if I learned about any plans for war against the white settlements. He said he wanted to prevent bloodshed on both sides. Several of the Apache warriors muttered angrily among themselves, and Blackhawk stepped forward with his hand on his knife. She is a spy for the soldiers, he said. We should kill her now. Running Wolf held up a hand for silence. Sarah Mitchell could have lied to us about this. Instead, she tells us the truth even though she knows it might make us angry. That says something about her character. It says she is foolish, Blackhawk replied. No white person can be trusted. Singing Bird spoke up from behind Running Wolf. Some white people cannot be trusted. Others can. We must judge each person by their actions, not by the color of their skin. The elderly woman walked forward until she was standing in front of Sarah. Why did you really come back, daughter? Tell the truth. Sarah looked around at all the faces watching her. Some were friendly, some were suspicious, and some were openly hostile. She knew that her next words would determine whether she lived or died, and whether she would be accepted or rejected. I came back because this is the first place I've ever felt like I belonged, she said. In my old life, I was always trying to be what other people wanted me to be. Here, for one night, I was allowed to be myself. I want to see if that feeling was real, or if it was just because I was scared and grateful. Singing Bird nodded slowly. And what will you do if we let you stay? You know nothing about our ways. You cannot hunt or track or fight. You will be a burden on the tribe. I can learn, Sarah said. I can work. I can help with cooking, sewing, caring for children. I'm not afraid of hard work. And when the soldiers come looking for you? Blackhawk demanded. When they say we kidnapped you again? I'll tell them the truth, Sarah said. That I chose to be here. Running Wolf had been listening to the discussion without speaking, but now he stepped closer to Sarah. There is something else we must discuss. If you stay with us, you cannot remain unmarried. Apache women who are not married or widowed live with their families. You have no family here? Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She hadn't thought about this aspect of Apache life. What are you saying? I am saying that if you want to be part of this tribe, you must find a husband, Running Wolf said. Or you must leave. The silence that followed was so complete that Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. She looked around at the Apache people and realized that several of the young unmarried men were watching her with interest. The idea of marrying someone she barely knew terrified her, especially after what had happened with James Patterson. How long do I have to decide? She asked. The winter ceremonies are in 1 month, Singing Bird said. If you are still here by then, you must be married or you must go. Sarah nodded, though her mind was racing. A month to decide whether to marry an Apache man and commit to this life forever, or return to the white world that had rejected her. I understand, she said. Running Wolf spoke to the gathered people in Apache, and most of them began to drift away. Only the elderly council members and a few warriors remained. They spoke among themselves for several minutes in voices too low for Sarah to hear. Finally, Running Wolf turned back to her. You may stay for the month of trial. Singing Bird will teach you our ways and help you decide if this life is truly what you want. But remember, if you choose to leave after learning our secrets and seeing our weaknesses, you will be making yourself our enemy. I would never betray you, Sarah said firmly. We will see, Running Wolf replied. Actions speak louder than words. That evening, as Sarah sat by the fire eating dinner with the Apache families, she reflected on how much her life had changed in just a few days. A week ago, she had been a shopkeeper's daughter preparing for a conventional marriage to a banker's son. Now she was living with Apache people in the desert, facing the possibility of marrying a warrior and spending the rest of her life as part of a nomadic tribe. The strange thing was that she wasn't afraid. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Singing Bird came to sit beside her as the evening grew dark. You have given yourself a difficult path, the old woman said. Maybe, Sarah agreed. But it's my path. That's what matters. And if none of our young men want to marry a white woman, Sarah had been trying not to think about that possibility, then I'll deal with that when it happens. Singing Bird smiled. You sound like Apache woman already. We do not worry about troubles that have not come yet. As the fire burned down to glowing coals, Sarah noticed Running Wolf sitting alone at the edge of the camp, looking out at the desert. She wanted to go talk to him, but she wasn't sure if that would be appropriate. In the white world, Unmarried men and women weren't supposed to spend time alone together. She didn't know what the rules were here. Go, Singing Bird said, as if reading her thoughts. He is thinking about difficult things. Sometimes it helps to have someone to talk to. Sarah walked over to where Running Wolf sat on a flat rock, staring up at the stars. May I sit with you? He gestured to another rock nearby. You may. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the desert. Finally, Running Wolf spoke. Are you sure about this, Sarah Mitchell? Once you choose this life, you cannot go back to being a white woman. Your own people will consider you lost to them forever. I've been thinking about that, Sarah said. I realized that I was already lost to them. They cast me out before I ever met you. At least here I have a chance to belong somewhere. Running Wolf turned to look at her, and in the starlight she could see something in his eyes that made her heart beat faster. There is something I must tell you, he said quietly. I have been thinking about your situation and I have an idea. But it would require great trust between us. What kind of idea? Running Wolf was quiet for a long moment, as if gathering courage for what he was about to say. I could marry you myself. Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. You... what? It would solve your problem of needing a husband, Running Wolf said, his voice carefully neutral. And it would show the tribe that you are truly committed to our way of life. But it would only work if you trusted me completely, and if you could come to care for me as more than just a friend. Sarah stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. Are you asking me to marry you? I am offering you a choice, Running Wolf said. You could choose one of the other young men, or you could choose me. Either way, you would have a place in the tribe. But why would you want to marry me? Sarah asked. You barely know me. Running Wolf looked back up at the stars. I know enough. I know that you are brave enough to walk alone in the desert rather than accept injustice. I know that you are kind enough to worry about strangers who helped you. And I know that you are honest enough to tell us about the soldier's request, even when it might have been safer to lie. Sarah felt tears stinging her eyes. Running Wolf, I don't know what to say. Say nothing now, he said gently. You have a month to decide, but know that if you choose me, it will be a real marriage, not just an arrangement for convenience. I would expect you to be my true wife, and I would be your true husband. As Sarah walked back to her sleeping place that night, her mind was spinning with possibilities. She had come back to the Apache camp looking for a place to belong, and now she was being offered something she had never dared to hope for. A chance at real love with a man who respected her for who she was. She lay down under her blanket and looked up at the endless desert sky, wondering if the stars might actually be showing her the way to a happiness she had never imagined possible.